Is anybody here an untenured academic? Okay, is anybody tenured? Okay, how many of you are 1Ls? No 1Ls. Good, they're studying and they're stressing somewhere. Where's the 1L? Oh, he left. 2Ls? 2Ls in the room? Okay, 2Ls, and they're all right here. 3Ls. 3Ls. Congratulations on making it through. No, who's here? Sorry. Are we ready to go? Ready?
Okay. I'm Zach Beach. I'm a staff editor on the journal, and it's my pleasure today to introduce Professor Adam Sulkowski. Professor Sulkowski has authored over 60 published works, including 36 peer-reviewed academic journals, mostly on issues related to corporate governance and sustainability. He has advised private and public sector entities on sustainability reporting, including the capital city of an EU country. Based on his interest in sustainability, data, and certifications, he became interested in blockchain and other technological advances. He has visited and often worked in 120 countries. He is currently writing a book about entrepreneurs in places where the business environment, including the rule of law, has been less than ideal. Please join me in welcoming Professor Sulkowski.
It's an honor, it's been a pleasure. Also, thanks for letting me go last. What I thought I'd do is share some of the major points that are in the article of your journal online. And then, just in case that falls short of expectations of our hosts or guests, I would like, with your permission, to try to recap the highlights of today's talks in one line each. What do you guys think? Sound good?
Yes.
And those who are still present can correct my characterization of your words. If there's time, I can show you the tweets that came from each session so we can decide if those reflect reality correctly. But in the sort of symposium format where the last person summarizes and tries to synthesize, I thought we'd try to adopt that at the very end with your consent. Sound good? All right, so new memes. That's the topic of this article. I can show you the link at the end. And what are the problems right now of the year 2020, besides the political problems and health problems that are dominating the headlines? Problems that will not go away as of November of this year, right? Regardless of our health, regardless of politics, we know that surveillance capitalism is here, not just the data that is being sucked up by Google right now and other entities right now as we speak, including audio and visual. But the fact that it's being used to manipulate us. How many of us have heard the term surveillance capitalism, by the way? Okay, good. So I had the luck of 2 nights ago hearing Zuboff, the author of the book, speak from 7:30 to 10 p.m., both in a large session, smaller session, then privately. And it's funny how much in the background, some of the ideas have lurked today, right? That the idea that data, what you think is your data or the data that we're even talking about, is not really ours, and that other people are not just monitoring us, but really manipulating our sense of reality and even the decisions that we think are ours. Subtly, and sometimes not subtly. AI and automation is obviously not going away as of December 2020. And ecosystem collapse, we've known this is happening for decades, right? But it's accelerating. So these are the problems that define at least the remainder of the first half of the century. And nobody, not even technology optimists, I have not heard even people that are really into technology and really into libertarian fantasies, nobody seems to think that tech on its own will solve our problems. So that's why it's fantastic that a law school has had a symposium like this. Bravo. I'd like to echo observations of the last speaker that beware, my friends, of being too narrowly focused. Congratulations on staying very OCD on the spectrum for law school and doing what you had to do to get the grades that you needed. But remember now to stay curious and hungry and ready to pivot. Don't put on the blinders too much, because a lot of our friends right now that put on the blinders and kept them on are unhappy. And those of us who stayed a little bit loose, a little bit sometimes more ready to embrace some risk and novelty, are alive and happier, and in our careers are flourishing more. And that's probably going to continue to be true. I'm saying a nod there. I don't know if your professor advisor would agree. Good to be put on the blinders when you need to when you're a law student. Stay curious and aware. Be ready.
In my class, also not while you're in class.
Oh no, put on the blinders. In class, put on the blinders. But I guess the synthesis there would be it's context specific. Get your spectrum on when you need to, and then take the blinders off once in a while and look around at the big trends going on around you. Again, those lawyers that as law students excelled but then failed to take them off occasionally are not doing as well. That's what it's going to look like, at least in my life experience, 20 years down the pike. So what do memes have to do with any of this? Well, it's actually related. Who knows the origin of the term meme? Oh, two people. All right, let's go with Denise. Oh, you're in the article. Okay. You see, everybody curious to read the article now? Do you guys want to know where meme comes from? All right, so is it just silly cat gifs? No, it's much more profound. What's the origin?
Well, I pass.
Great, good, okay. So you guys ready for a little bit of fresh knowledge then? It goes back decades to the book The Selfish Gene. How many people have heard of that? Okay, seminal work, and the author was looking for an analog in society to what genes do, self-replicating code that with great fidelity does repeat itself and reproduces itself, but occasionally has the capacity to mutate. And that capacity to mutate and change once in a while generates a better chance of the animal surviving, right, to changing conditions. So we get it, a meme in society is an idea, a simplified abstraction, right, just like a gene in biology, that self-replicates but can evolve. So we see how it's now, why, you guys are probably wondering, how does this relate to cat gifs? Because that's what I thought a meme was, right? Those images that we tweet. All right, well, it's similar in that, again, words are like memes, right? Words evolve over time, their usage, their spelling, and their application. But we got it pretty much under control that a meme is like a gene in biology, a self-replicating idea, right? Now, law, do you guys agree? That's what you've been learning about, is a bunch of memes. Societally constructed baskets and categories and entities. What is a business? A business is an enterprise? A person, right? Your corporations class, you learn to give birth to an artificial human being, right? Separate from you under the law that can sue and be sued. I held back a little bit for my students.
Well, a lot of people are looking at me because they had me for corporations. You got graphic.
It's a birthing class, and under the law, going back to ancient Roman times, this is a separate human being that can enter into agreements and sue and be sued. And it's been taken to a ridiculous degree in inappropriate ways by the Supreme Court, but that's an idea of a meme, a socially constructed fiction, a simplified version of reality that self-replicates. What is a business? It is a human being under the law. That's a societal construct. Do we get the origin of respondeat superior and agency? These are societal constructs that are memes. They're simplified abstractions that we're still applying right now in 2020 that were cooked up over hundreds of years of master-servant relationships. And that's what you learned. That's what I learned. That's what your professor learned. And what do we do in law school? We perpetuate them, and then you go and practice, and you perpetuate it. Do they evolve? We heard a little bit about that today from the practitioners, right? The memes are evolving. What is an employee? What is an agent versus an independent contractor, right? An employee. And yet, they're sticky. We're still working with these words, right? These simplified constructions that are fictions, they're useful fictions, but we sometimes forget they're fictions that we've cooked up. Is everybody with me? Is this making sense? Is this novel? Is this new? Is this interesting? I'm trying to read the room. All right. Happy? We're going to get to how it relates to everything. All right, so simplified abstractions and categories. So this is the world that you guys have been steeped in for, in all of your cases, at least almost 2 academic years, in some cases almost 3 academic years, in some of our cases decades. And again, to emphasize, Genes, like means, mutate, and that's a useful thing. Common law is actually even more like evolutionary biology than a code-based system, right? Because we take these old traditions, and then a judge can bend them a little bit. Online technologies are invented, and we apply centuries-old ideas from contract law to this new context, and we can make it work, right? We mutate an old idea, just like genes mutate. But again, I want to emphasize this. I want to make sure everybody has this in their head. Where did we get, this conference is supposed to be about the future of work, the future. And yet, what words have we been using? Independent contractor and employee came up. What is the origin? I want to hear from somebody else. The origin, I've already said it in this talk, what is the origin of the agency-principal relationship? The hint is in that top line. What does that mean in Latin? Let the master answer. We are using memes from the slave era, from the era where people owned you, or you might own other people. It's 2020 and we're talking about the future of work, but we've been using words and terms and memes from centuries ago.
Actually, it's heartbreaking.
Is it worth emphasizing? Is everybody happy that we're meditating on this for a second? So why are we doing that? It's what you're trained to do. It is the essence of law. And that's good that you have learned to absorb an idea, a principle, look at a novel situation, apply that principle. That is a fundamental skill in any law school. It's what I teach my business students. I'm one of those weird subset of the law professorial community that teaches in a semester the highlights of law school to business students. Yeah, it is a lot. But that same skill I'm trying to impart, how a lawyer thinks. Well, we get a principle, and it's a useful life skill in other situations when you're arguing with your roommate, your partner, or anybody, to identify the issues. What are the principles we agree on, the models, the constructs, the means. And then let's look at this novel situation, like a gig economy worker that Annie presented on. And what does this novel situation, is it more like an apple or an orange? Which meme does it fit? So we're doing what we're supposed to as law professors and as law students. And the system arguably is working the way it should. If we want to take an optimistic view of things, American courts and presumably courts in common law jurisdictions elsewhere are taking our means that we have, the models that we have, and trying to apply it to a new situation. And the ideas are mutating, and we're hearing new standards develop. That's what Annie's presentation was about. Now the question is that the only way that law is made in our weird system here? We have common law, but we have statutes, we have regulations. And that's where this is going, to be aware both of what's good about the system we have, what's good about having mental models, but also realizing maybe we need to collectively and individually take a step back and think, is that the arrangement I want? Is that the model is that the only way of looking at my life, defining my meaning as to whether I'm an independent contractor or an employee? Is there another way to define both the duties and privileges of a job and my life, right? Can we imagine a model other than what we've had to absorb and use? Yeah, so just two more examples, corporate personhood we've already covered. And just one more fun fact, Mass Bay Colony in Jamestown. Imagine people fleeing the old world, trying to establish a new society, for better or for worse. Certainly not perfect, right? But what did they use to set up the governance structure of these new public entities, these new governments? They didn't have any better model than the corporate form. So they used private business incorporation ideas to form the Mass Bay Colony and Jamestown Colony. And then when this country separated, we were so sick of abuse of corporate power by the British East India Company that's when we acted. My family wasn't even here yet, but collectively. Decided that we distrusted corporate abuse of power so much that was the era where we forced business corporations in the original 13 newly independent states to require private companies, private corporations to go every year and ask for a renewal of their charter from the whole state legislature. So there's an interesting story with some lessons, right? We took an old model, nobody could imagine anything better. Well, okay, fine, let's just incorporate it like a business to form our new state. Well, we really hate corporations though. So let's make them come to the legislature every year and ask for permission to continue to exist and ask them, what public purpose do you still serve? Are we getting the message here? That both there was the adaptation of an old meme, but then the will to act politically to put guardrails on something. Not because of tradition, but because of a newly imagined solution through statute. All right, this came up, there's been a bunch of really cool coincidences in the last 2 weeks besides meeting Zuboff, and one of them has been talking about discrimination in employment and agency law together about the last week or two with undergrads, master's students, and MBAs. And you present something intensely enough times in a row over the course of a few days, and you start making connections that you didn't see before. I don't know if this has happened to anybody presenting, but suddenly you're like, oh wait, there's a new way of looking at this. And so here we go. Maybe this is the dawn of an era of non-binary entities. Are we all now, nobody's shocked if we mention that, well, there's something beyond male and female, and that's a construct anyways, and people change, it's fluid. How many of you are familiar that the race boxes are becoming a little bit obsolete in some places, right? My brother's kids, what were they going to check? Biracial. What was the next generation going to check? So race, we're in a non-binary, the dawn of a non-binary era for gender. Other demographic baskets, these binary definitions are becoming obsolete. They just don't fit our reality anymore. Groups of people working together. I'm literally this week talking to both a business student and an investor, bringing up the idea of a benefit corporation. How many people have heard of a benefit corporation? Under the law, this is not a B Corp certification, under the law, forming a company at its root, at its basis, to serve both profit-making and a societal or an environmental benefit. Literally, students and a student and an investor separately said, oh, you mean a charity? I don't want to form a nonprofit. And you have to slow down and say, but look, no, this isn't a charity, and it's not an LLC or C Corp, it's in the middle, it's serving more than one master at once. All right, so benefit corporations is again a non-binary entity. And finally, gig workers. We don't need to cover this, you guys are familiar with, it's been covered today. But these were literally some of the slides I used to do a sprint through the problem and then slow it down a little bit to see, can we apply old memes? Here we go, here's the exercise from class. And the realization, well, does anybody see maybe a solution? Can you imagine some kind of a new category, and what would it look like? What would the obligations be? What would, in both directions? All right, good, we get it? So this is the whole idea of the paper. Maybe we need new memes. Maybe our memes are obsolete. And how do we, does our system have the ability to create new memes? We do, like a benefit corporation, right? In the very first years of the country, again to emphasize, we borrowed the meme of incorporating a business to form states, but then we put really, really strong guardrails in those first years on businesses, private businesses. So through statute, through regulation, and ultimately, I hate to say it, we have to have a really naive faith in an obsolete idea. I guess collective action and democracy. How else have societies, whether it's civil rights movement, Vietnam, or other revolutions, how have we ever put guardrails on anything? As Zuboff said, there have been generations that sort of grow up with the idea, I might have to get out in the street and take a day off. We've had some luck, prior to a few years ago, of not even imagining that that's needed. Or maybe we've been conditioned to think so. All right, so what if we're framing it wrong? Last few thoughts. What if these memes are obsolete, that our survival and needs and benefits should be connected to work? What kind of a society is this that I could die if I don't have a job, and I need to then hope that I'm in a context that I can go to the public safety nets, if they exist, and figure out how they work to get, just to survive, right? And so it's interesting that in the last few years, these fringe ideas have moved to the mainstream of, well, maybe we need a guaranteed minimum income, as, I'm blanking on the name, is it John?
Andrew Yang?
I thought people would have an association with Yang. No, he was our Second speaker,
Tom.
Thomas.
Oh, it's hard.
Thomas spoke about universal basic income. So he stole the thunder a little bit on that, but exactly, if we're imagining the future of work, well, what if we imagine a future where our basic needs are not met? Basic survival needs are not defined by whether I am in a some kind of a relationship working for somebody. One more thing that the paper meditates on is well, we're in an era where you could have collective organization of a group of people. We already have that. With the agreements automated and online so that you don't have the conventional business structure of overhead and managers. You agree to work with others, they agree to work with you, and it's all mediated online, and there's no overhead. There's some nice things about that idea, there's some not nice things about that. The point is we have that ability, we have the technology. Some people are using it, and now under the law, what do we call that? So a year ago I was at another symposium and we were talking about, can you have a memberless LLC? It's possible to form one? And would that work? Would that satisfy everybody? Or do we need a new meme? Do we need a new societal construct? But again, I really want to leave that point, and I think I made it more dramatic by pausing and not saying anything after I said it. We're still using memes in the background that are from a past era that not many people seriously want to go back to. So, do we need new memes? Key points again, a little more time. They're already evolving. The advocating of new memes is needed. It's meetings like this where it sometimes happens, where people cook up a new idea, two people are kicking around ideas, and something gets rolling, right? So maybe after this, if you guys want to stay in touch, maybe between yourselves, if you're chatting over a beer, maybe kick around. What does it look like, an employment relationship of 2025 or 2030? What would we advocate for as members of the bar? You're going to be officers of the court. You're going to be imbued with special powers and privileges. You're going to have the credibility of being able to talk at an event like this and suggest an idea. So with that comes maybe, it's both can be a pleasure, but maybe there should be a duty that comes with that to think whether the memes that you've inherited are ideal and how they can be tweaked. And to not be scared to maybe step up and write something for whether it's a newsletter or for a newspaper or an editorial or a blog. Hey, something's not quite perfect, and maybe there's a better solution. What do you think?
Amen to that.
That's what some of my students sometimes do this. I'm sorry, I still. All right, so why are we even still building off that? I've made that point several times now. So this is just for fun, just to get our creative juices flowing. Who's heard of Lex Cryptographia? All right, so it's this idea that in the era of blockchain, where we can encode the rules, the norms of our relationships, and the rules of our contracts into software code, right? Do we need a new word for that? When the code becomes law. That phrase actually has some history, but we're actually at a time in technological development where that is happening. Question for you as lawyers, will you ever advise a client to fully automate a contract with no ability for any human discretion to overlook a minor breach? How many people actually would like that idea? Full automation, no role for human discretion in contractual relations. Whether it's personal relations or business relations, we want the capacity to forgive a small breach. Right? All right, so anyway, so Lex Cryptographia is about the current era where we're putting more and more things into software code, whether it's DAOs, smart contracts, other relationships. So if you want to look it up, there's a book now about that. And just to provoke a little bit, well, was there ever an era where we had sort of gentle, I guess the gender neutral term would be gender people of leisure. The obsolete term would be gentlemen of leisure, but that's so gender based, right? So you're welcome. I looked up the feminine form of flaneur, which is a flâneuse. Who's heard this word? A flaneur. Who's seen old 19th century paintings of Parisian streets with people with umbrellas, a top hat, a couple arm in arm, just looking lackadaisically? Maybe, peut-être, je prends un petit café. I sit there right now. Speaking of law, they're making illegal those outdoor heaters so that the Parisians can sit and smoke their gauloise and drink their coffee. And what do? You people watch. You just watch reality go by. You stroll without purpose to take in reality. to enjoy life. Very un-American. I am. And I would like to apologize profusely to all the good people of the heartland of this country. I'm from a place a little bit closer to debauched Europe, where these ideas apparently are embraced. This idea of sitting. It's not properly fully American, I know. But maybe there's something to that in the era of... No, but Boston, you know.
Close.
Although to be a little bit serious, we are kind of proud of certain moments in history. We're speaking of breaking old memes, thinking of even the idea of separation. One of the cradles for advocating intensely for abolition and then changing the laws that could allow people under the law in the last 150 years ago, roughly 170 years ago, it was still possible to trap somebody who had been living freely in Massachusetts, take them to a court, and by law have them shipped back to a master in another state. So to take it more seriously, again, this idea of memes being powerful, they have led to some horrible things, including literally trapping free people and putting them back into bondage. And we look back now with pride, joking aside, when there have been those moments where some people that were considered radical or crazy sometimes broke those old memes and thought, is this right? And is there a better way of looking at this situation, right? Anyway, so now to go back to the playful. Maybe we need to think of la loi flânerie. What is the law to judge these people that are useless and that sit and are not engaged in productive labor, right? As implied by these gears, right? I mean, they're going to exist. Nobody seriously predicts that everybody is going to have a purpose. Has anybody read anything about this topic that says that we're going to have full employment? Maybe it'll happen. Maybe those projections are wrong, but I'm reading a lot of projections. We're going to have a larger percentage of society that we just don't really need you to do anything. So what's the law that's what's the mean? What basket do we put them in? What are the duties and obligations that come from that? And so this is just a playful way to provoke thought. Should we have a la loi flânerie, right? A law to govern these people that are not busy during the day or pretending to be busy. All right, so are you guys happy? All right, you may applaud or snap. You're welcome. And before I forget, thank you very, very kindly. Now, to indulge in a little bit of synthesis, Ngozi, we've talked about this. Ideally, does Ngozi want algorithms to exist? No. Very good. Very good. But if we look at the tweak, this is the tweet that I sent out was maybe we should be including the objects of algorithms, us, right? People, potential employees, consumers, into the governance. Thomas talked about the inevitability of technological advance, and maybe we need to consider universal basic income, taxation, education and training. Training for what? For purpose? Or training for?
Dignity and meaning.
Training on how to be a flaneur or a flaneuse, right? Even on your downtime when you're not pretending to be busy, working for somebody. Can we educate you, or should we be educating each other on how to feel like it was a meaningful day? Alan and Annie spoke about worker classification. We've already made reference. Big takeaway, anything you want to expand on there? Law may relocalize? That was a fascinating point that we might be, kind of like the book, The End of Big suggests, that we're going to be relocalizing, not just for food, but for governance. Whether you're progressive or conservative, it might fit your ideology, it might not, but that trend in some contexts is happening. Alan and Corey.
Good job.
Beware groupthink. As Preet Bharara, his book, by the way, Doing Justice, has anybody read it? Does anybody want to be a prosecutor?
I want to be Preet Bharara.
Preet Bharara, his book is one of the top 5 I've read in the past year. Whether you're a lawyer or whether you're not a lawyer, or any kind of a human being, it takes the steps of criminal prosecution and analogizes it to how do we understand reality, how do we advocate a point, and what are consequences when you work with other people, whether it's relationships, professional or otherwise. How do you set consequences when somebody missteps? Anyways, one of his big points was exactly what Alan mentioned. That's the reason for mentioning Preet Bharara. He mentions either that it is or should be, I forget now, carved in above the doorway of any office, especially a prosecutor's office. Remember, you could be wrong. No matter how sure you are of something, you could be wrong. And he mentions as a prosecutor, people being dead certain we got the right guy, and they don't. Those closest to the Menendez brothers, crying on the phone, saying they've got to be innocent. I grew up with these kids. No way they could have killed their parents. They were wrong. Okay. So Alan, that was a powerful point you made about the FBI and the Spanish National Police. Some people convince themselves through groupthink. They got the wrong person. All right, Hillary. That's the last punchline. Hillary said, stretch, reach, explore from strong core of expertise. And I'm saying we need new memes. We need to reimagine, stay curious, and enjoy pivoting to take the Vitruvian Man one step further in 3D, be ready to pivot. If there's one piece of career advice that came up during the ride from the airport, and you guys were talking about career advice just before I came up here, my advice is embrace the things that go badly. Because the things I thought were career hampering disasters opened up opportunities. I don't regret a single minute. Even the worst day of being an academic has been a privilege the last 15 years. That wouldn't have happened if my dreams came true right out of law school. So if you've had a bad year, if something ends what you're doing, and you feel like, oh God, this is so wrong and bad, it might be. But it might be leading to something better. If there's one piece of wisdom to leave you with in your career as lawyers, that would be it. All right, so whenever you read about technology and think about it and the future of work and other things, we begin to think maybe the future is inevitable. We've seen projections about data, the amount of data being collected going up. We've seen projections about processing power going up, pollution going up. What could this be? There is actually a data point here, and there's a data point here. You can't see it because the scale is so big. What could it be in 1969, where we measured units in the vicinity of 400,000? It went down to roughly the range of 600 in this critical year, 2011. And it's at 0 right now. And it involves technology, involves a line of work that Jared, some people from your profession went into. Space travel. What are these two? So what tipped you off? Mentioning Jared?
So that was Ariel.
Ariel?
Oh, that's smart.
So what tipped you off that this is about space travel? 1969, the furthest Apollo spacecraft went was over 400,000 kilometers from the planet's surface. In 2011, the last mission of the space shuttle, it was not more than 700 kilometers, and that was the furthest capacity of the United States of America. It's right now 0 for human spaceflight. Who would have guessed that in 1969? So for all our talk about technological advance, it's not inevitable. For all the talk about planetary ecosystem degradation, that one I think might be, there's some level of disaster that we can't avoid, but we're talking about mitigation these days and how do we adapt. But I think that this should be in some ways inspiring, that the future is never fully known. And anything you heard today could be, what? Wrong. Including everything I just said. Maybe embrace the old memes. Don't imagine. Put the blinders on and work for the man and love it. Thank you. By the way, that's the link to the book I'm writing, which includes case studies of people, for example, building solar mini-grids in a place like Madagascar where there is no rule of law. How do you run a business? If you want other stories, there are teasers of chapters there. Please follow on Twitter. If you don't have an account, twitter.com, tweet and like. That's the email. Please stay in touch. And if you want to see the article, I thought I'd put the address of your new online page of the journal. Where did it just go? That was me Googling the distances. In case you think that we're that good as academics that we do stuff like that. All right. So this is the new page of this journal that sponsored this event online. And please go and click and download and share, and thank you. One more time, thanks to Denise. In 15 years of higher ed and publishing over 60 times, the word that comes to mind is easy. I didn't know who you were. I never knew I was going to be ending up speaking here. Whenever an email came from you, here's something to keep in mind that your clients and you as professionals will love. Remember the key word that they should think when they see a ping and see your email address, easy. But the timeline isn't too aggressive, not too slow. The edits are not too ridiculously OCD, not too sloppy. Right down the middle, reasonable, constructive. Thank you for everything you and your people did. Is anybody else here who worked on the article?
Yeah, the SEs helped. Robert, Delaney.
Where's Robert? Robert, thank you.
Jared.
Jared? Where's Jared? Jared, thank you. And you worked on this? What's your name again?
Delaney.
Delaney, thank you guys. That was really a pleasure. And I want to thank the faculty. That was an amazing opening. You were the first meme of the day as Rosie River. Abby,
You know what? I'm on brand, guys. On brand.
I don't know what you guys, whether it's in the public water supply here. Oh, that's a great one. Whoever did that. If you want to look, there are photographs.
Thank you.
No, I wanted to show you tweets of your guys' talks. Anybody who presented today, if you want to go to my Twitter account, I posted photographs and summaries just like you saw on the slides. If you want to see a record of today, if you want to see who spoke, refer back to it. There's a permanent record. But thank you for creating the first meme of the day as Rosie River. You embody it. We started on a meme, we end on a meme. Abby, thank you. Also easy to work with you. So thank you to all of you.
Top of the day to top of the afternoon, Allison Chrisman. I am the HR Director for the Kansas Judicial Branch. We have externships open this summer for work in the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals in Kansas. It's due today. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's probably in your career shopping for something to do over the summer, and you have an access to justice desire.
Thank you. Can I make a plug too? I work at Legislative Post Audit, so we do, it's not technically policy work, but program evaluation and stuff about all the different areas of Kansas. It's really interesting. I practiced law for a few years after graduating from KU, really hated it. And I'm loving being in kind of more of a government research type, non-traditional lawyer position. So we have full-time positions open now, and we are flexible if people are interested but aren't graduating, but would be open in the summer. So it's Legislative Post Audit, which I realize is a horrible name for an organization, but you can just Google us. The stuff's on our website. Yeah.
Questions?
I have one. How do we, right, like, so, I love the meme analogy. I don't want to call it a metaphor, because I think it's much closer to literal than that. But meme generation it's not science. It has to have something behind it. What, as folks who are in the trenches, wherever we are located in the trenches, who are interested in creating new memes for law so that law does the work that it should do, what can we do, as lawyers or policymakers or in courts or representing folks or even writing laws to generate these new memes that we might or might not need.
Yeah. So I mentioned showing up at conferences. As a member of the bar, it already gives you some credibility to write op-eds, write newsletters, write for practitioners, write for academics, write for the masses. Any other ideas here? Annie, you practice? There are other people in the room that...
I would just say, think, even in your briefings as an associate, think creatively, don't be afraid to kind of challenge the legal structure.
You do that when you go to court?
Throw it away, but,
you go to court and you do that?
Yeah.
All right.
Not on the grand scale that you're proposing, but little by little.
Little tweaks and nudges. And Hillary, you
Well,
practice.
my practice pro would be is, make your own path. I mean, I really think, back to amplify your theme of how we're shifting, I am concerned not so much for our cohort, because we're above average humans with extraordinary skills, so we have the cognitive capability, but think of yourself as your own unit and find your way. And I really feel like, particularly since this is a journal event, I have found that every opportunity that has happened to me is because of my writing. And so that the power of being able to put ideas into something that, for some reason, I'm so delighted that you like, but has made a difference in my career. Every single day.
Amen. That's what I told Zach yesterday on the way from the airport. Even maybe not the lousiest thing you ever think you wrote in law school, but I took a very maudlin piece that I didn't think was that particularly great, and I put it into a newsletter. So I published something else that wasn't that great. It wasn't even in a law journal. But the very first job in higher ed that I applied to was at least proof of ability to publish. And then reach out to old professors and get a research stream going. Whatever you decide to do, the important takeaway is exactly what Hillary just said. Publish stuff. Your writing is better and more informed than that of the average person, and we forget that. You probably have conditioned yourself to think humbly, which is normally a good thing. Occasionally nurture a little bit of confidence and realization that you have been given an extraordinary education. You're aware of some things that other people don't see. I've talked to some of you guys. I'm blown away by your maturity, and that, you know, I would get a little bit of your confidence going and try writing a few things. The written word is still matters, and if only silly people write stuff and feel confident and louder, and find people are humble and cautious, we see the result. What do you guys think over here? As a entering academia, how long ago did you enter academia?
Okay, so I've been a BAP part of this since July.
And what do you see? Do you see also the same thing that law students and generally lawyers, it takes a while to build up some confidence, right?
Well, I think, you know, one of the issues that you see is a lot of professions or a lot of professional schools, but particularly in law school, this desire to sort of ingrain this idea of competition in a way in which to essentially bring down people's self-esteem. And I find that a lot of law students leave law school with what they often say is trauma from actually this game. And it's amazing because, I mean, you're talking about being educated to be aware, which is a privilege that many people can't afford. You're talking about being in a classroom and using words like traumatized to explain your educational experience, but there are a lot of students talk that way. And I think that kind of is how, like, a lot of lawyers come out feeling that very much not confident in their skill set. And so I think in thinking about how to go forward, just recognizing the fact that that whole experience that you have in law school is just one part of your life, and that you really need to take into the fact that the very fact that you have an education shows that you're actually very intelligent, and that just because of a certain grade or a particular class doesn't actually mean that you have something to contribute.
And besides writing and gaining confidence, so thanks for that, Josie. One more thing that would be negligent to mention is network, constantly be networking. My only regret in life, maybe, is not being more outgoing. Anybody who's passed law school, would you guys all agree? The more people you know, you just sometimes don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what the person sitting next to you sometimes does for a living, and how much they might value what is on your mind, or what you might value what is going on in their mind.
For the opportunity they may know about that you don't. You know, just say something.
Yeah, and literally, look, somebody I interviewed for my book was here yesterday, and it only hit me in the afternoon. She lives in Lima, Peru. She's somebody who 40 years ago imagined that there's a way to train autistic kids to work in offices. She's one of the prides of the alumni community of this university. How many people have heard of Liliana Mayo? Yeah, there are people from Peru that have never heard of her. There are people from our city that have never heard of her. But there's an example of networking. You're one heartbeat away from Abby, who has heard of her. She's very open and accessible, but that's just a little example. I mentioned there have been a bunch of weird coincidences the last few weeks. That's one example. That somebody that you've interviewed, that you've looked up to for years, you've heard about their work, mainstreaming kids with autism and cerebral palsy that used to be kept in cages. This is only 40 years ago. And she did this in the middle of a civil war to give a little bit more inspirational value. Those are the kind of people on the planet, and they're around us. They were here on campus with you. And I apologize that it came to me in the afternoon. But she spoke on the phone, and she's here every February, here in Lawrence. She got her PhD here. And she was grown up on your state motto, to give you a little bit more inspiration. What's your state motto mean? Stars through adversity. So be aware of that. You asked how to spread new memes. Just like memes, silly cat gifts. People know people, they connect, they share ideas. For some reason, silly ideas sometimes get shared, the things that make us laugh. If that's the way you're going to share things, go for it. That's your skill set. If you share things better through a legal brief, let that be your passion. This is mine. And if you want a book on that has a whole chapter on memes, and this has a little bit of content on the future of work. It just came out, MIT Press, and I recommend it if you're more curious about how memes in this weird new world that we have, how they spread, and how they have utility beyond just making you giggle occasionally. So thank you again, it's been a lot of fun, and I hope sincerely that we stay in touch. Don't let this be the last time that we see each other, all right?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody one last time for showing up and spending your day with us. Hopefully it was informative and you also learned some new knowledge about the future of work and what it means for our careers as attorneys or professionals in the working world. Thank you too to Denise Densler, Professor Newell, and all of our speakers today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly or reach out to us on our KU Journal Law website. Thanks.
Do you have any ideas how to spread memes? You ask me. What are yours?
Go viral. I knew how.